November 12, 1943. A cramped office in the Bendler Block, Berlin. The building at 76 Titzufer housed the nerve center of German Army intelligence operations, where two of the VA's most accomplished analysts were about to confront a truth that would shatter every assumption the German High Command held about their enemy. Colonel Reinhard Galen, head of Foreign Armies East, sat across from his counterpart, Colonel Alexis von Rorona, who led Foreign Armies West. Both men had reached their positions through demonstrated analytical brilliance and meticulous attention to detail. Both had spent years tracking enemy capabilities with professional precision, and both were now staring at documents that represented something far more devastating than any battlefield defeat. Between them lay a stack of papers that appeared unremarkable, standard American military logistics reports captured during recent operations in Italy. The forms were bureaucratic, mundane, even filled with columns of numbers recording supplies delivered, consumed, and requisitioned. Nothing about their appearance suggested they contained information that would prove the mathematical impossibility of German victory. Yet the numbers they contained represented an industrial reality so overwhelming that both officers had spent the previous week cross-referencing sources, checking calculations, and searching desperately for errors that would make the figures less apocalyptic. Van Rona's hands trembled slightly as he pushed the top document across the desk. It was a simple supply requisition form from the American Fifth Army in Italy, listing monthly delivery targets for a single American corps operating in the Italian theatre. The form was stamped, dated, signed by multiple logistics officers, clearly authentic. Galen studied the figures in silence, his face growing pale as he absorbed their implications. The Americans were delivering more ammunition to one corps in 1 month than the entire Wehrmacht received on the Eastern Front during the same period. He looked up at Van Rona, searching his colleague's face for some indication this was error or deception. Van Rona's expression offered no comfort. He had already worked through the same calculations, reached the same conclusions, and spent 3 sleepless nights hoping he was wrong. "This cannot be accurate," Galen said quietly, though his tone carried no conviction. He was not stating a belief, but expressing a wish, the desperate hope that reality might somehow be less terrible than the evidence suggested. Von Rorona pulled another document from the stack. "I thought the same. This is a fuel delivery report for the same corps covering a single month of operations. They received 3.22 million gall of gasoline and 800,000 gall of diesel." He paused, letting the numbers settle. "I compared this to our own fuel allocations. Army Group Center, with 3 full armies and over 500,000 men, receives less fuel in a month than this one American corps." The two men had spent the past week engaged in exactly this kind of comparison, cross-referencing captured American documents with German logistics reports, interrogations with aerial reconnaissance data, agent reports from neutral countries with analysis of captured equipment. Every source confirmed the same impossible truth. America was not just outproducing Germany. They were operating on a scale that defied comprehension, on a level that made German industrial capacity look medieval by comparison. The numbers told a story that no amount of courage, tactical brilliance, or ideological fervor could overcome. Germany was fighting against arithmetic itself, and arithmetic always wins. The journey to this moment of terrible clarity had begun months earlier, but its roots stretched back years into fundamental miscalculations about American industrial potential. The German intelligence services had tracked Allied industrial capacity since before the war, compiling reports on factory locations, production capabilities, and resource availability. But they had consistently catastrophically underestimated what America could achieve when fully mobilized. This was not mere incompetence. The assumptions built into German strategic thinking, shaped by Nazi racial ideology and Germany's own industrial experience, made American industrial power seem impossible, even fantastical. Germany's own wartime experience colored everything they believed about industrial production. By 1943, the Reich had mobilized every available resource, stripped occupied territories of raw materials and machinery, implemented slave labor on a massive scale, and pushed its industrial capacity to what seemed like absolute limits. German factories operated around the clock. Workers put in extended shifts. Production of weapons and ammunition had increased dramatically from pre-war levels. Germany was producing tanks, aircraft, and artillery at rates that would have seemed unthinkable in 1939. Yet, despite this total mobilization, despite conquering most of Europe and exploiting its resources, despite the desperate intensification of production under Albert Speer's direction, Germany was losing the material war. The fundamental German miscalculation began before the first shot was fired. In May 1940, President Franklin Roosevelt stood before Congress and announced that America would produce 50,000 aircraft annually as part of a massive rearmament program. Over the following months, he expanded this vision. 185,000 aircraft, 120,000 tanks, 55,000 anti-aircraft guns, and 18 million tons of merchant shipping within 2 years. These figures were transmitted to Berlin through multiple intelligence channels. When presented to Hitler and his advisors, the German leadership's response was dismissive, even contemptuous. The numbers were obviously American propaganda, they concluded, designed to intimidate Germany and boost Allied morale. The assessment seemed entirely reasonable based on available data. In 1939, American military aircraft production totaled fewer than 3,000 planes annually. The US Army ranked 18th in the world in size, smaller than Portugal's. American tanks were obsolete designs, few in number. The US Navy, while substantial, was divided between two oceans and focused on coastal defense rather than power projection. How could a nation with such limited military capacity suddenly increase production 60-fold in just 2 years? Violated every principle of industrial mobilization that German experience had established. Building factories took years. Training workers required months. Developing production techniques demanded extensive trial and error. Roosevelt's proclamation seemed like the fantasy of a desperate politician rather than achievable reality. Reich Marshal Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe and one of Hitler's closest advisors, reportedly laughed when he heard Roosevelt's announcement. While this account comes from secondary sources rather than contemporary German documents, multiple historians cite Göring stating that Americans could only make refrigerators and razor blades and could never produce the military equipment necessary to defeat Germany. Whether the exact quote is accurate, the sentiment it captured was certainly real. German leadership genuinely believed American industrial capacity was unsuited for military production. This assessment seems supported by observable facts. America excelled at producing consumer goods, automobiles, household appliances, but military equipment required different expertise, different organizational structures, different engineering approaches. German industry had been preparing for war since 1933. How could American consumer goods manufacturers possibly match German military industrial capacity? Aircraft production statistics proved even more lopsided and alarming. Germany produced approximately 15,596 military aircraft in 1942, according to the US Strategic Bombing Survey's analysis of captured German records. This figure represented a significant increase from previous years, and German leadership celebrated it as proof of industrial strength and mobilization success. The Luftwaffe was being equipped with modern fighters and bombers in substantial numbers, but American production in 1942 reached 47,836 aircraft, more than 3 times German output. When German intelligence officers first encountered these figures, they assumed they were propaganda or included training aircraft, gliders, and non-combat types, but analysis proved the figures represented combat aircraft comparable to German types. In 1943, the disparity widened further. American production reached 85,898 aircraft, while German production, despite intense efforts to increase output, reached approximately 20,600 planes. The Americans were building more than 4 aircraft for every one Germany produced. In 1944, American production would reach 96,318 aircraft, while German production peaked at approximately 3,987 planes before declining under the impact of Allied bombing. By war's end, the United States would produce approximately 300,317 military aircraft total, a figure that exceeded even Roosevelt's ambitious 1940 projections. The sky belonged to the Allies, not because of pilot skill or aircraft quality, though both mattered, but because American factories could build planes faster than German pilots could shoot them down, and faster than German factories could replace losses. But perhaps the most devastating comparison involved merchant shipping because it directly addressed what German naval strategy depended upon. Germany understood that logistics in a global war depended fundamentally on maritime transportation. The Atlantic Ocean was the crucial battleground where U-boats sought to sever supply lines between America and Britain. If Germany could sink ships faster than they could be built, Allied logistics would collapse. Britain would be starved into submission, and American material superiority would be irrelevant because it could not reach the fighting fronts. The U-boat campaign was Germany's answer to American industrial capacity. Destroy the ships and production numbers become meaningless. Germany tracked Allied shipping losses meticulously. In 1942, German U-boats achieved their greatest success, sinking 1322 Allied ships totaling 6.3 million tons. This seemed like devastating success, the highest annual total of the war. Surely the Allies could not sustain such losses indefinitely. The Battle of the Atlantic appeared to be tilting toward Germany. U-boat commanders were celebrated as heroes, their successes prominently featured in German propaganda. Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of the U-boat fleet, confidently predicted that sustained sinking rates would force Allied surrender before American industrial production could become decisive. Yet, despite these massive losses, Allied shipping capacity increased throughout 1942. How was this possible? The answer lay in American shipbuilding capacity that defied all German understanding of industrial production. The captured documents and intelligence reports included increasing references to Liberty ships, a standardized cargo vessel design that American shipyards were producing at extraordinary rates. Initially, German intelligence dismissed reports of Liberty ship production rates as obvious propaganda, too absurd to credit. The claim stated that American shipyards were building these 10,000-ton cargo ships in an average of 42 days from key laying to launch. Some were reportedly built in less than 2 weeks. This was impossible according to everything German naval architects understood about shipbuilding. Ship construction was a slow, methodical process taking months or years. Each vessel was essentially custom-made with thousands of parts fabricated and assembled by skilled craftsmen. The welding alone for a 10,000-ton ship would take many weeks. Claims of construction times of 6 weeks violated every known principle of ship construction. Yet prisoners of war consistently reported seeing dozens of Liberty ships in American ports. Captured documents reference Liberty ship serial numbers in the thousands. Luftwaffe reconnaissance flights of American coastal areas limited, though they were photographed shipyards with multiple similar-looking vessels in various stages of construction. Agent reports from neutral countries confirmed massive American shipbuilding expansion. Von Röhne requested a technical assessment from German naval intelligence, asking experts to evaluate whether the reported Liberty ship production rates were theoretically possible. The response confirmed the impossible. American shipyards were indeed producing Liberty ships at the reported rates using revolutionary construction methods. Instead of traditional riveting, Americans employed welding throughout, which was faster but required different skills. Instead of building ships sequentially from keel up, they prefabricated entire sections in parallel. Bow sections, stern sections, deck sections, engine rooms, all built simultaneously in different areas of the shipyard, then assembled like enormous building blocks. They employed assembly line techniques never before used in shipbuilding, applying lessons from automotive manufacturing to maritime construction. They built dedicated Liberty shipyards rather than adapting traditional shipyards, optimizing every aspect of the process for speed. They trained tens of thousands of new workers, including large numbers of women, in specialized welding and fabrication techniques. The results were staggering. At peak production, American yards were completing 3 Liberty ships per day. In 1943 alone, the United States launched 19.22 million tons of merchant shipping while U-boats sank 2.6 million tons. America was building ships more than 7 times faster than Germany could sink them. Individual Liberty ships could be sunk. Individual convoys could be attacked. But the overall mathematics were devastating for German strategy. Even if U-boat achieved unprecedented success rates, even if every U-boat patrol resulted in multiple sinkings, American production would still exceed losses by enormous margins. The Battle of the Atlantic was being lost not through any failure of U-boat tactics or crew courage, but through simple arithmetic. Germany could not sink ships fast enough to prevent the American industrial avalanche from reaching Europe. 2 specific Liberty ships illustrated American production capability with crystalline clarity. The SS Robert E. Peary was built in 4 days and 15.5 hours in November 1942, from keel laying to launch. The SS Joseph N. Teal was built in 10 days in September 1942. German naval intelligence officers reviewing these reports initially assumed they were propaganda fabrications, but multiple sources confirmed the vessels existed and the construction times were accurate. The Maritime Commission itself acknowledged these were special incentive ships built as publicity stunts with extensive prefabrication done before keel, laying and significant fitting out work after launch. These extreme records were not repeated because they proved inefficient for routine production. But even acknowledging these caveats, the fact that American shipyards could build ocean-going cargo vessels in days rather than months demonstrated a level of industrial capacity that Germany could not match. These revelations accumulated throughout 1943 like hammer blows against German strategic planning. Each new piece of intelligence confirmed and amplified the picture of overwhelming American industrial superiority. The M4 Sherman alone was produced at 11 different facilities operated by automotive companies like Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, and agricultural equipment manufacturers like Allis-Chalmers and locomotive builders like Baldwin and Limmer. These companies had no previous tank building experience but applied their existing manufacturing expertise. Mass production techniques from automotive plants, heavy machinery fabrication from agricultural equipment makers, large-scale welding and metal working from locomotive builders to military manufacturing with devastating effectiveness. This distributed production model provided resilience that German centralized production could not match. If one Sherman production facility was bombed or experienced problems, 10 others continued production. Total production barely fluctuated. Germany, with more centralized production, was more vulnerable to disruption. A single successful bombing raid on a critical facility could significantly impact national production. The decentralized American model was not just more productive, but also more resilient, harder to disrupt, and capable of rapid expansion by bringing additional facilities online. Artillery production followed similar patterns of overwhelming American superiority. Germany produced approximately 11,000 artillery pieces of all types in 1943. Howitzers, field guns, anti-tank guns, anti-aircraft guns, representing the maximum output German industry could sustain. This figure included production from German factories in occupied territories. Every facility that could be mobilized for artillery production. America produced approximately 43,000 artillery pieces in the same year, nearly 4 times German output, while simultaneously supplying Britain, the Soviet Union, and other allies with thousands more pieces through Lend-Lease programs. German forces in combat noted that American artillery support was overwhelming, not because of any technical superiority. German artillery pieces were often superior in design, but simply due to volume. American artillery units fired support missions that consumed more ammunition in hours than German units received in weeks. This was not tactical excellence or better fire control. It was industrial capacity translated directly to battlefield firepower. Truck production represented perhaps the starkest and most operationally significant comparison between American and German industrial capacity. Modern military operations require transportation. Armies move on wheels and rails. Supplies must be transported from ports or railheads to fighting units. Wounded must be evacuated. Troops must be moved to threatened sectors. Artillery must be positioned and repositioned. In short, military effectiveness in modern warfare depends fundamentally on logistics mobility, and logistics mobility depends on motor vehicles. The Wehrmacht remained partially horse-drawn throughout the entire war, with hundreds of thousands of horses providing transportation for artillery supplies and equipment. This was not a romantic attachment to traditional methods or cultural preference for horses. It was simple lack of sufficient motor vehicles. Germany produced approximately 100,000 trucks in 1943, a figure that had to serve both military and essential civilian needs. The Wehrmacht never achieved complete motorization. Infantry divisions typically had their artillery and heavy equipment horse-drawn. Supply columns relied heavily on horse-drawn wagons. Only elite formations like panzer divisions were fully motorized, and even these often experienced vehicle shortages. America produced approximately 620,000 trucks in 1943, almost all for military use. American Lend-Lease programs delivered 427,284 trucks to the Soviet Union alone during the entire war, more than Germany's total truck production for all purposes during the entire conflict. Every American infantry division had more organic transport capacity than a German panzer division. Some captured documents referenced fuel being used for heating buildings, running electrical generators for non-essential purposes, and fueling vehicles for recreational trips. The waste of fuel for purposes German forces would consider criminally negligent was routine in American operations. During the Battle of the Bulge, German planning explicitly depended on capturing American fuel depots because the Wehrmacht could not supply sufficient fuel for the offensive through its own logistics. This dependency on capturing enemy supplies was itself an admission of German logistical weakness and strategic desperation. Steel production statistics underlined every other production comparison because steel is the foundation of industrial warfare. Weapons, vehicles, ships, infrastructure, tools all require steel. Military production in an industrial war is fundamentally constrained by steel availability. Germany produced approximately 30 million tons of steel in 1943, representing maximum output from German industrial capacity plus captured European steel production. This figure included output from occupied French Belgian and Czech steel mills operating under German direction. It represented total mobilization of every available steel-producing facility. The United States produced 81 million tons of steel in 1943. America produced nearly 3 tons of steel for every 1 ton Germany produced. The Soviet Union, despite massive industrial evacuation and German destruction of Western industrial areas, still produced approximately 18 million tons. Combined Allied steel production approached 150 million tons versus German output of 30 million tons, a 5-1 advantage that translated directly to weapons production. More steel meant more tanks, more ships, more artillery, more trucks, more aircraft, more ammunition, more of everything required for industrial warfare. The steel production gap was not something that could be overcome through better tactics, superior training, or ideological commitment. It was a fundamental resource constraint that determined maximum possible military production. Germany was fighting a 5-front war. Western Europe, Eastern Front, Italy, air war over Germany, Atlantic Ocean with 1/5 the steel production of its combined enemies. The mathematics of defeat were written in steel production figures. Colonel Galen and Colonel von Rona spent weeks during late 1943 analyzing these figures with increasing desperation, cross-referencing sources, searching for errors or exaggerations that might make the picture less catastrophic. They found none. Every source confirmed the same basic reality. They brought in other analysts from both foreign armies east and foreign armies west, showed them the data, asked for independent assessments. The conclusions were always the same. America possessed industrial capacity that made German production look like cottage industry. The Soviet Union, despite massive losses and German occupation of significant industrial territory, had successfully evacuated and rebuilt industrial capacity that exceeded German output. Britain, though smaller in absolute terms, maintained production sufficient to supply a modern army while also providing advanced technologies like radar, jet engines, and code-breaking machinery that Germany struggled to. Germany faced three major opponents, each of which had greater industrial capacity than Germany in at least some categories. Combined Allied production advantage was overwhelming across every category of military equipment. The only question was how long German tactical superiority and defensive advantages could delay inevitable defeat. The analysts prepared a comprehensive report for the German High Command in December 1943. The report was clinical, mathematical, undeniable in its logic.